And tentatively set to kick things off on our prelim portion of UFC 261, we have a couple of strawweight prospects in Brazil's Ariane Carnelossi making her second appearance with the promotion, taking on the UFC Academy winner out of the UFC PI in Shanghai, China. We have Liang, also known as Dragon Girl. Matt, for Liang, she's a fighter that a lot of people might already recognize. And if you go down through the list, there's plenty of fighters and fights that she's had against some names that you might recognize. Like I said, I mean, Lilia Shakarova being one of them. She had a one-off with Bellator against Juliana Velasquez, who would ultimately become their champion at 125 pounds. And another one on that list, Maria Agapova. Now, unfortunately, she lost all three of those fights. And you might think to yourself, well, geez, that's not very good. I mean, she is, however, 4-1 in her 5 on in. And so is Ariane Carnelossi. Now, for Liang, she's on a 4-fight win streak. For Carnelossi, she did have that loss in her debut against Angela Hill. But the focus more so in this fight is on the newcomer, because we have 3 fighters representing the UFC PI in Shanghai, UFC Academy winners. You have a couple of names in Rongzhu, and he's got a big fight against Kazula Vargas. But you also have a fighter whose name, and I will throw this one out there, I will dazzle it around and about, Aoriqileng, who's taking on Jeff Molina. For Liang, this is a really interesting one, because if you look at her style, to me, you'd think it plays well against somebody like Ariane Carnelossi. I mean, she is very grappling and wrestling heavy. She likes to get on top. She likes to try and get into position and then work a submission. If you look at her total body of work, 13 of her 15 wins are by finish, 9 of them by submission, 4 of them by knockout. She does have a tendency to shoot from very long out, and to me, it almost looks like desperation takedowns, and it starts very, very early on. Liang is not afraid to shoot from like the first 15 seconds, and she will lunge across the cage, go for your feet, go for whatever she can get, and it has gotten her into some very big issues. If you go back and watch that Juliana Velasquez fight, she shoots. And listen, the other thing about it, she used to fight at 25, she's fought at 115, and you're going to get beat by some of the bigger fighters. I mean, Juliana Velasquez is Bellator champ for a reason. She can grapple quite well. But you look at the other ones, I mean, the Maria Agapova fight, it was weird because you had Liang that almost pulled guard, and then Agapova got on top of her, and it was kind of a good night after that. Like, she didn't offer up a lot of resistance. Lilia Shakarova, though, she lost to Lauren Murphy in her debut. Very, very accredited wrestler and grappler. If you've seen any of her fights, she's like, I don't know, like a tiny power plant in all of her fights, except for the Murphy fight. And then against, you talk about it, Shakarova, Agapova, it is what it is. But when you look at a fight like this, for Liang, she's on a nice little win streak, like I said. She tends to kind of jump into position. The one thing that I don't like that I've heard out of her, she's had the one fight in the States, and she talked about it in a couple of different interviews. She said she was concerned about the diet and the weight cut for that one, and that was a problem the last time she fought in the U.S. I do just worry about that just a little bit for this one, but it's an interesting set of circumstances coming in here.
It really is, and I do like the weight that you had brought up, because for Carnelossi, I always look at her, and yes, she is one of the more heavily muscled fighters at strawweight, but I do think that she could fight at atomweight in the future.
She is one of the most muscled up fighters, period.
That's true, really, just regardless of weight class. But when I look at Carnelossi, I really do look at a fighter who, if I'm being honest, I do think atomweight is more suited to her weight class, because just height-wise, she gives up so much height on a lot of these women who she's fighting. And I know we're going to talk about Jessica Andrade a little bit later on in the evening, but with Andrade, she can get past her height deficiency, I guess, because of the amount of power she brings to the cage. With Carnelossi, she has really good power, especially with her forward movement. We did not see the best version of her in her last fight against Angela Hill, though, and I do think that was just one of those cases of it was too much too soon for Carnelossi. It's a big ask for anyone to fight Angela Hill, really in the top 15. She's one of those fighters, A, she loves to stay active, and B, she just is really well-rounded. And for Carnelossi, she had a little bit of success in that fight. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Angela Hill won pretty much every minute of that fight, but there were a few positives to take from that fight. Carnelossi, when she lands, she has big power for the division. You could tell that Angela Hill, who has been in there with just pretty much everybody at 115, she was able to land some really clean shots that they weren't stunning her, and they might not have been dropping Angela Hill, but you could tell that they were taking an effect. And I do think if Carnelossi could add the accuracy along with her punching power, we would be dealing with a very interesting fighter down at 115. And the thing for Carnelossi too, which is a little unfortunate, she's just not... I don't really know where her style fits into the division as a whole, because really, when you look at 115, you have your longer, rangier strikers, and then you have your really dominant grapplers, like your Carlos Esparza's, your Tatiana Suarez's. For Carnelossi, it will be really interesting to see where she does fit into the division moving forward. And for Liang Na, There's one comp that I think you danced around it and you pretty much said it, but I'll just make it. She reminds me a lot of a much more green Mackenzie Dern. She reminds me of that version of Mackenzie Dern that we saw in her first couple UFC fights, just in that the comfort in her striking. She's definitely more comfortable in her striking than Dern was, especially in those early fights. Dern did not want to be on the feet, but in the fact that when Dern was having trouble on the feet in her strikes, she would just put her hands down by her knees and try to walk her way into those clinching positions. And for Liang, nah, that's going to be really tough, especially against a power puncher like Carnelossi. So it will be really interesting to see how she chooses to strike her way into the clinch to try to get this fight to the mat.
And I mean, the thing again with Liang, I mean, you look at it, a wushu and wrestling base, and those things can go well together. I mean, we've seen plenty of wushu practitioners kind of pop up out of the...
Roy Nelson?
No, he's a kung fu guy, but... You still do see a little bit of wushu influence in certain styles, but again, with Liang Na, the striking isn't quite there. It's still very green. I would think that working at the PI under Dean Amazinger, it's still going to get better and better 100%. And better. You've got a lot of great training partners, and over at that PI, they haven't dumped millions and millions of dollars into that facility without trying to produce some stars. So Liang Na, maybe one of those fighters, but again, I look through it. I will say, I mean, she does roll well on the balls of her feet when she tries to strike. She doesn't throw a ton of kicks. She can strike from a 1-2, but then she's trying to clinch. Or from far out, she's trying to shoot. Like, it's just kind of... The bones are there. You can see it's there. It's just she's still so young. I mean, only 24, almost 25 years old. When she fought Juliana Velasquez, she was 21. So it's one of those things. You're going to mature as a fighter. She already has tons of pro experience for somebody that's this old. She was the martial arts cage 125-pound champ. She was a 2018 Asian MMA championship. And listen, I have to say this now that we're this far into it. If you're trying to find tape on her, I will explain how. You have to go into Tapology. You have to take the characters next to her name, you Google them, then you translate the page, and you can find plenty of fight tape. If you're ever looking for WLF Wars tape, and again, you've got Aoriqileng, who's got a fight coming up. You also have Rongzhu that has a fight coming up. You find them there. That's how you do it. But I was able to find it, again, little green. She can get out wrestled by bigger wrestlers. That's another thing that I've seen even recently. And to throw it on over to Ariane Carnelossi, somebody that's training with Ketlin Vieira, with another name, Lara Procopio right now, over on the Instagrams. She also just got her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt from her coach, Marcio Mendes, with M4BJJ. And over on his, and I had to translate it, but he had said she had won the No-Gi World Cup just about 8 weeks ago. So you can tell that Carnelossi, working on her BJJ, working on her grappling, I think that lends good credence into this fight. But again, she is very much a power puncher. You see it out of the finishes that she has. She's a Thunder Fight champ. You got the striker grappler. I would say more striking than grappling 100%. For sure. You get the grappler. Again, it is a clash of styles. If we look at the odds, Matt, I was a little bit surprised. We've had a huge amount of line movement recently on Carnelossi. She opened a minus 150. She's minus 189. For Liang, she opened a plus 130. She's now at a plus 155. And to me, I actually, as I was doing the research for this one, I put a little bit on Carnelossi, which I rarely ever do. I usually wait till the end of the week. Let's have a look at the Tapology votes. It's a surprise to us, 870 total votes, and you have 69% Carnelossi, 79% have her by decision. What are you thinking here?
I do like Carnelossi in this fight because where you look at what ranges this fight's going to be taking place at, it's going to be very close range for the majority of it. And I don't really like what I've seen out of Liang striking, whereas for Carnelossi, we've seen her struggle with those longer rangier strikers, but on the inside, like you had mentioned, she has power for days, especially at this weight division. So I do think if Carnelossi can defend some takedowns and really keep this into more of a boxing fight, she should be able to win this one.
With Carnelossi, you look at her, she can keep her hands quite low. She has quite a bit of a square stance as well, and good takedown defense. So yeah, I really do like Brazil's Carnelossi in this fight. The first of our 3 Chinese fighters representing the PI on this card. We have Liang Na taking on Ariane Carnelossi. And Matt, both of us going with Carnelossi. So overall, really looking forward to the card. 3 title fights up at the top. You're not going to want to miss those. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say, Matt, let's get into it.